Return. The quantum communication array at Earth Defense Command hadn't made a sound in 3 years. Admiral Sarah Chen had almost forgotten the massive device existed, tucked away in the corner of the main control room, like an expensive piece of furniture nobody used anymore. That's why the sudden burst of static at 4:17 a.m. made every technician in the room jump. "Ma'am," Technician Ross called out, his voice cracking with excitement. "We're getting a signal on the quantum channel. It's impossible." Admiral Chen set down her coffee and walked over to the array. The quantum communicator was humanity's most advanced piece of technology, capable of instant communication across vast distances. But it required both ends to have the same technology, and as far as she knew, only 3 ships had ever been equipped with quantum communicators. 2 were docked at Luna Station, and the third, "Run the identification protocol," she ordered. The technician's fingers flew over his console. After a moment, he looked up with wide eyes. "Admiral, the signal is coming from the UES Prometheus." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The Prometheus had been humanity's first deep space exploration vessel, equipped with the most advanced technology Earth could build 12 years ago. The ship had launched with a crew of 150, led by Captain David Torres, Sarah's former colleague from the Naval Academy. They were supposed to explore the Kepler system and return within 5 years. That was 12 years ago. The Prometheus had sent regular reports for the first 18 months, then simply vanished. No distress signal, no wreckage, nothing. The ship and its crew were declared lost with all hands. "Patch me through," Sarah commanded. The main screen flickered to life, but instead of the clean bridge of the Prometheus she remembered, Sarah saw something that made her question her sanity. The background looked like the inside of a ship, but the walls seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Complex patterns moved across surfaces that appeared to be made of living crystal, and in the center of it all sat a man she barely recognized. Captain David Torres had been 38 when he left Earth. The man on the screen looked perhaps 45, but there was something fundamentally different about him. His eyes held depths that seemed impossible, as if they contained entire galaxies. When he smiled, Sarah noticed his teeth seemed to catch and reflect light in ways that shouldn't be possible. "Hello, Sarah," David said, and his voice carried harmonics that made the speakers vibrate in patterns they weren't designed for. "Permission to come home." Sarah stared at the screen for a long moment before finding her voice. "David, is that really you? Where have you been? We thought you were dead." "It's a long story," David replied. "One that's going to change everything. We need to dock at Luna Station. And Sarah, you're going to want to call an emergency session of the Earth Council. What we've learned out here, what we've become, it's going to affect all of humanity." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, her sensor technician called out urgently, "Admiral, you need to see this. The ship, it's not reading right on our instruments." Sarah looked at the sensor display and felt her world tilt. According to their most advanced scanners, the ship approaching Earth was roughly the same size as the Prometheus had been when it left. But their mass detectors showed something impossible. The ship was registering as having negative mass in some sections and infinite density in others. Energy readings fluctuated between 0 and levels that should have melted the hull. "David," Sarah said carefully, "what happened to your ship?" "We upgraded," David said simply. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. We're not exactly the same humans who left Earth 12 years ago. The crew and I, we've been changed, enhanced. We've learned things that most species in the galaxy didn't think were possible." "What kind of things?" David held up his hand, and Sarah watched in amazement as his fingers seemed to phase in and out of existence. For a moment, she could see right through him to the wall behind. "We learned that reality has layers," he explained. "Most beings only exist in one layer at a time. We exist in several simultaneously." The communication was interrupted by alarms throughout the command center. Sarah's defense coordinator looked up from his station with panic in his eyes. Admiral, we have multiple ships decloaking throughout the system. Zentari Empire battle cruisers, at least 20 of them. Sarah cursed under her breath. The Zentari Empire controlled most of the local galactic cluster, and they didn't like surprises. If they detected unknown technology near Earth, they would consider it a threat to their dominance. David, she said urgently, we have company. The Zentari are here in force. I know, David replied calmly. We can feel them. Don't worry, Sarah. They can't hurt us anymore, and we won't let them hurt Earth. What do you mean you can feel them? Before David could answer, a new voice cut into their communication. The voice was cold, mechanical, and filled with authority that expected absolute obedience. Primitive human vessel, this is War Commander Zek Thol of the Zentari Imperial Fleet. You will surrender immediately and submit to boarding. Your ship contains technology that belongs to the Empire. David's expression didn't change, but Sarah noticed the walls behind him began to pulse with a brighter light. War Commander, David said politely, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This technology doesn't belong to the Zentari Empire. It doesn't belong to any government or species currently known in this galaxy. You lie, human. No primitive species could develop such energy signatures. You have stolen Empire property, and you will face Empire justice. Sarah watched David's face carefully. She had known him for over 20 years, and she could tell when he was about to do something that would change everything. War Commander, David said, his voice taking on harmonics that made Sarah's bones vibrate. I want you to understand something very important. We are not the humans who left this system 12 years ago. We have been taught by beings older than your entire civilization. We have learned to see reality as it truly is, not as your limited instruments tell you it should be. Enough talk. The Zentari commander roared. All ships prepare to fire on the human vessel. Sarah felt panic rise in her throat. 20 Zentari battle cruisers could reduce the Prometheus to atoms in seconds. David, get out of there. But David just smiled. Sarah, watch this. It's important that you understand what humanity has become. On the tactical display, Sarah could see the 20 Zentari ships powering up their weapons. Energy readings spiked as plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes prepared to fire. Then, just as the weapons reached full charge, something impossible happened. Every single Zentari ship simply stopped. Not destroyed, not damaged, just stopped. They hummed motionless in space like insects trapped in amber. Their engines went silent, their weapons powered down, and their communication arrays went dead. What did you do? Sarah whispered. I asked their ships to take a nap, David explained casually. Consciousness and matter aren't separate things, Sarah. Once you understand that thought can directly affect reality, many things become possible. Sarah stared at the tactical display. 20 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy, rendered completely helpless by a single human who claimed he had simply asked them to stop. The crews are unharmed, David continued. They're just very confused right now. Their ship's computers are showing them error messages they've never seen before. Would you like me to wake them up, or should we have our conversation first? Before Sarah could answer, her communication officer called out. Admiral, we're receiving emergency transmissions from all over the galaxy. The Vorthan Confederation, the Calirian Republic, the Hive Collective. They're all asking about energy readings from our system. Sarah realized that what had just happened to the Zentari fleet was being detected across known space. In a matter of minutes, every major power in the galaxy would know that something had changed near Earth. David, she said carefully, I think you need to dock immediately. We have a lot to discuss. Agreed, David replied. But Sarah, I need to prepare you for something. When we dock, you're going to see that we didn't come back alone. We brought friends. What kind of friends? The kind that needed sanctuary after their worlds were destroyed. The kind that have been waiting thousands of years for a species like humanity to emerge. The kind that are going to help us prevent the same thing from happening to Earth. As the Prometheus began its approach to Luna Station, Sarah noticed something that made her question everything she thought she knew about physics. The ship wasn't moving through space in the conventional sense. Instead, it seemed to be folding space around itself, traveling impossible distances in mere seconds. When the ship finally came into visual range, Sarah had to sit down. The Prometheus was barely recognizable. What had once been a sleek, functional exploration vessel was now something that looked like it had been grown rather than built. The hull seemed to be made of a material that shifted between metal, crystal, and something that looked almost organic. Sections of the ship were transparent, revealing internal spaces that appeared to be larger than the external dimensions should have allowed. "My God," Dr. Elena Vasquez whispered from beside her. Elena had been the Prometheus's chief science officer before being reassigned to Earth Command 5 years ago. "What happened to them out there?" "I don't know," Sarah replied, "but I have a feeling we're about to find out." As the impossible ship approached Luna Station, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was about to take a step into a much larger, much more dangerous universe. The question was whether they were ready for what was coming next. The Prometheus docked with Luna Station, using procedures that defied every law of physics Sarah knew. Instead of the careful mechanical process she was used to, the ship seemed to merge with the station's docking port like two liquids combining. The airlock sealed with a sound like singing crystal. "Sarah," David's voice came through the communication system, "we're ready to come aboard. But I want you to know that some of my crew might look different than you remember." The changes affected everyone differently. Sarah took a deep breath and headed for the docking bay, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. Whatever the crew of the Prometheus had found in the depths of space, it was about to change the course of human history forever. As she walked through the corridors of Luna Station, Sarah could hear the Centauri ships in the distance, finally coming back online, their crews undoubtedly reporting to their superiors about the impossible human technology they had just witnessed. Soon, every empire in the galaxy would be watching Earth, waiting to see what humanity would do next. The age of humanity as a minor species in the galaxy was over. What came next would depend entirely on what David Torres and his crew had learned during their 12 years in the dark between the stars. Revelations and consequences. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the docking bay of Luna Station, watching the airlock with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Behind her, a full security detail waited with weapons that she knew would be useless against whatever Captain Torres and his crew had become. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood beside her, clutching a medical scanner that had been giving impossible readings since the Prometheus docked. The airlock hissed open, and the first person to step through was someone Sarah barely recognized. Commander Maria Santos had been the Prometheus's chief engineer, a practical woman known for her no-nonsense approach to problem-solving. The person who emerged from the ship looked like Maria, but her skin seemed to contain flowing patterns of light that moved beneath the surface like living circuitry. "Admiral Chen," Maria said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "It's good to see you again." "Maria." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "What happened to you?" Maria smiled, and when she did, the patterns of light under her skin pulsed brighter. "I learned to see the universe as it really is, Sarah. Matter and energy aren't separate things. They're just different expressions of the same fundamental force. Once you understand that." Maria held up her hand, and Sarah watched in amazement as the woman's fingers began to reshape themselves, flowing like liquid metal before solidifying into tools. "You can convince matter to become whatever you need it to be." More crew members began emerging from the ship, and each one was more impossible than the last. Dr. James Park, the former medical officer, seemed to exist in multiple places at once, his form flickering between different positions, as if he couldn't decide where to be. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, who had been the communications officer, appeared to be made of living starlight, her body translucent and filled with swirling galaxies. But it wasn't just the transformed humans that made Sarah's breath catch. Walking among the crew were beings she had never seen before. Some appeared to be made of crystalline structures that sang softly as they moved. Others looked like shadows given form, their bodies shifting and flowing like smoke. A few resembled plants or trees, but they walked upright, and their eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. "David," Sarah said as Captain Torres finally emerged from the ship, "who are our guests?" "Refugees," David replied simply. Their worlds were destroyed by the same force that's been consuming star systems across the galaxy for the past 1,000,000 years. We offered them sanctuary, and in return, they taught us things that most species don't learn until they've existed for millennia. One of the crystalline beings approached Sarah, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Admiral Chen, I am called Harmony of Distant Songs. I speak for the survivors of the Kethmar Collective. Your species has shown us kindness when no other would. For this, we are grateful." "You're welcome," Sarah managed, still struggling to process what she was seeing. Before she could ask more questions, her communication officer's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Admiral, we have incoming transmissions from Earth Command, the Zentari Empire, and at least 12 other galactic governments. They're all demanding explanations about the energy readings from our system." Sarah sighed. She had expected this. Patch through Earth Command first. The main screen in the docking bay flickered to life, showing President Michael Harrison in the White House Situation Room. Behind him, Sarah could see the Secretary of Defense, the director of the space program, and several other officials who looked like they hadn't slept in hours. "Admiral Chen," the president said, his voice tight with tension. "What the hell is going on out there? We've got every alien government in the galaxy calling our ambassadors, demanding to know about some kind of superweapon." "Mr. President," Sarah began, "the Prometheus has returned. The Prometheus was lost 12 years ago, with all hands." "That's what we thought, sir. But Captain Torres and his crew have just docked at Luna Station. They've been changed, sir. Enhanced. They've learned technologies that make our most advanced systems look like stone tools." David stepped forward into the camera's view. "Hello, Mr. President. I apologize for the dramatic return, but we needed to make sure Earth's voice would be heard in what's coming next." President Harrison stared at the screen for a moment. "Captain Torres, you look different." "We all do, sir. The beings we encountered in deep space taught us things about reality that most civilizations never learn. We've gained abilities that will allow humanity to defend itself and help others in ways we never imagined possible." "What kind of abilities?" Before David could answer, alarms began sounding throughout Luna Station. Sarah's tactical officer's voice came through the communication system with barely controlled panic. "Admiral, we have a problem. The Zentari fleet is moving toward Earth, and they've called in reinforcements. We're detecting over 100 ships entering the system." On the tactical display, Sarah could see the massive fleet taking formation around Earth. Zentari battle cruisers, each one capable of glassing a planet's surface, arranged themselves in attack formation. "They're demanding immediate surrender of the Prometheus and all its technology," the tactical officer continued. "War Commander Zekthul is claiming that humanity has violated galactic law by possessing advanced technology without proper authorization from the Empire." President Harrison's face went pale. "Admiral, our defense fleet can't stand against that many ships. We're talking about the complete destruction of human civilization." David remained calm, but Sarah noticed that the crystalline patterns on the walls of the Prometheus began to glow brighter. "Mr. President, with your permission, I'd like to handle this. What can you possibly do against 100 warships?" "Watch," David said simply. The main screen switched to external cameras showing the Zentari fleet. Sarah counted at least 120 ships, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to smaller but deadly destroyers. It was enough firepower to reduce Earth to rubble in minutes. David closed his eyes and held out his hands. Sarah felt a strange pressure in the air, as if reality itself was holding its breath. On the screen, something impossible began to happen. The Zentari ships began to slow down. Not just their engines, But everything. Their weapons stopped charging, their communications went silent, and their formation began to drift apart, as if they were moving through thick liquid. "What's happening to them?" President Harrison asked. "I'm asking time to move differently around their ships," David explained, his voice strained with concentration. "From their perspective, they're moving normally. From our perspective, they're frozen in temporal amber. It will give us time to talk." Dr. Vasquez checked her instruments and looked up with wide eyes. "Admiral, the temporal distortion field extends for millions of kilometers. He's literally slowing down time for an entire fleet." Sarah realized that what she was witnessing wasn't just advanced technology. This was something that bordered on godlike power, and it was being wielded by someone who had once been her colleague at the Naval Academy. A new voice cut through the communication channel, speaking in the cold, mechanical tones of Centauri authority. But this voice was different from the war commander they had heard before. This one carried the weight of absolute power. "Humans of Earth," the voice said, "this is High Admiral Vexkar, Supreme Commander of the Centauri Imperial Navy. Your primitive species has committed an act of war against the Empire by disabling our fleets. Prepare for immediate annihilation." "High Admiral," David replied calmly, "we have no desire for war with the Centauri Empire. We simply want to exist in peace and help other species do the same. You possess technology that belongs to the Empire. Surrender it immediately, or face the consequences." It was then that one of the plant-like beings approached the communication console. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through ancient forests. "High Admiral Vexkar, I am called Root of Deep Wisdom. I speak for the Council of Gardeners. Perhaps it is time you learned the truth about the technology you claim to own." There was a long silence from the Centauri fleet. When the High Admiral spoke again, his voice had lost some of its arrogance. "The Gardeners are extinct. They vanished 1,000,000 years ago." "We did not vanish," Root of Deep Wisdom replied. "We were driven into hiding by the same force that now threatens all life in this galaxy. The humans found us and offered sanctuary when your empire would have enslaved us. They learned from us because they have something your species lacks." "And what is that?" "The ability to grow beyond what they were born to be. The Centauri have remained unchanged for 10,000 years. Humans have exceeded their original limitations in just 12 years of study. This is why the ancient protocols have been activated." Sarah had no idea what the ancient protocols were, but the effect on the Centauri fleet was immediate. Ship after ship began broadcasting surrender signals. The ancient protocols were sealed away, the High Admiral said, his voice now filled with something that might have been fear. "No species has been worthy of them for 1,000,000 years. Until now," Root of Deep Wisdom said simply. "The humans have proven themselves capable of growth, compassion, and sacrifice. They found us when we were dying and gave us hope. They learned our teachings not to dominate others, but to protect them. This is why we have chosen to share the deepest secrets of reality with them." David opened his eyes and lowered his hands. The Centauri fleet began moving normally again, but they made no aggressive moves toward Earth. "High Admiral," David said, "we don't want to be your enemies, but we won't allow anyone to threaten Earth or the refugees we've given sanctuary to. The choice is yours." President Harrison leaned forward. "Captain Torres, what exactly are these ancient protocols?" It was Harmony of Distant Songs who answered. "They are laws written into the fundamental structure of reality itself, created by the first civilizations to achieve true understanding. When a species proves itself worthy, they gain access to abilities that transcend normal physics. Your people have proven themselves worthy." "Worthy of what?" Sarah asked. "Of becoming something more than you were," David replied. "Sarah, what we've learned out there isn't just about technology. It's about the potential that exists within every human being. The refugees we brought back aren't just seeking shelter. They're teachers, and they're willing to help humanity take its place among the truly advanced civilizations of the galaxy." On the screen, the Centauri fleet was withdrawing to a safe distance, But Sarah could see other ships arriving at the edge of the system. The news of humanity's transformation was spreading across the galaxy, and everyone wanted to see what Earth would do next. "Mr. President," Sarah said, "I think we need to convene an emergency session of the Global Council. This is bigger than just first contact. This is about the future of human civilization." President Harrison nodded slowly. "Captain Torres, how many other species are out there that need help?" "Thousands," David replied. "The force that's been consuming worlds across the galaxy is still out there, and it's getting stronger. But now, for the first time in a million years, there's hope. Humanity has learned to see reality as it truly is, and that means we can fight back." As more ships from across the galaxy began arriving at the edge of Earth's solar system, Sarah realized that humanity was no longer a minor species hiding on the edge of known space. They had become something new, something powerful, something that would either lead the galaxy into a new age of peace and prosperity, or stand as its last defense against ancient darkness. The crew of the Prometheus had returned home, but they had brought with them the weight of the entire galaxy's future. And somehow, Sarah believed that humanity was ready for that responsibility. The age of human limitations was over. What began next would echo across the stars for millions of years to come.